First rail fanning outing for final month of December. I'm not sure how I'm going to edit this month's stuff. I'll try to get everything up separately so I don't have to do those long video again. No. You have idiot man over here. No, but we are, I know it's already the middle of the day and I'm recording this, but we'll see what we get. Me and Max start out this clear, foggy morning at the bottom of the racetrack, just north of Lakeland Junction. Q452 is lugging his train out of the lowlands at Winston Yard, headed for Waycross, Georgia with a pickup at Wildwood. We've set up just south of 10th Street, and those two GEs are still working hard to get their train moving. These first two sets of cars are commodities that you wouldn't normally expect to see on this train up until PSR, where this train swings into Winston and picks up what is on the front, loaded phosphate hoppers and empty sulfur tanks. These usually were not carried by this train, but since he makes a stop in Winston, he picks up this stuff and takes it north, since the next shipment of this stuff won't go out until 10 o'clock tonight. Next up, we swung around. 0738 was requesting to leave Winston and head east towards Auburndale and Davenport. He had some pickups to make out there, but he already had 19 cars of miscellaneous freight to take that way. An EMD leader this morning too. Off to the right is Lakeland's McIntosh power plant, or one of them I should say. Turns out there's actually 4 or 5 power stations based around this area, but only one of them is coal-fired. Hours would go by before any more trains would light up the scanner, so we got some food and messed around for those few hours before hearing some peculiar radio chatter deep in the Bone Valley. So we started to drive around to see what we could find, and our faces lit up when we drove by Winston and found this. A medium approach signal which would direct a train coming out of Winston Yard off of the north leg of the Y onto the main line, but telling them because of this approach signal to stop at the very next signal, which would be South Lakeland. Why we'll get to in just a moment. It was only a few more minutes before the train in question rounded the curve. It was K85003, as needed phosphate loads out of the Bone Valley Yard at Prairie, bound for interchange with the BNSF at their Cicero Yard near Chicago, Illinois. Since we rarely catch these unit trains on our little day trips like this, we decided to give a little chase to this train, following it up the hill and onto the Vitus subdivision. But now we reach the reason why they would have to stop at South Lakeland. Coming out of Winston, the main line is double-tracked, but South Lakeland is at the very top of the hill where that double track becomes one, and they would have had to wait there for an opposing train to clear, which would have been our next train today if this guy hadn't popped up on the radio. It was Amtrak 91 coming down from New York City, with Phase 4 Heritage number 184 in the second position. Thundering west out of their Lakeland station stop headed to Tampa, we came up to Wabash Avenue thinking that the phosphate train and Amtrak would meet somewhere around here. Turns out that they would actually meet each other about 3,000 feet south of here. I had a particular shot in mind to try to get this train with, so we moved up to it. It was Galloway Road just south of Kathleen, Florida. And looking off to the distance, you can see that Florida is definitely not flat in many places. Well, come on, we were just at one of its hilly spots in Lakeland. However, having already lugged their train out of the Winston lowlands, and even with a loaded train, this crew definitely experienced barely notices these hills. Obviously, even with trains like Q452 this morning taking excess traffic from Winston, it's still not enough to keep up with the amount of diammonium phosphate that this state has to ship out. Something really interesting about this train that I noticed afterwards was that there's no end of train device on the end of this guy. Now, whether they just didn't have one, didn't want one, or God forbid forgot one, I heard something later about them, quote, swapping EOTs at Wildwood, though there's nothing to swap here.
So there went K85003. That's the first phosphate train, northbound phosphate train I've seen in Central Florida in a long time, because they've been sending them out at like 2 in the morning recently, like you've seen in a few of my recent videos. I actually got lucky enough to see one at Dade City, if you remember that one, but oh, it had CSX, but I don't care. That's a phosphate train. You don't see those too often, especially in daylight down here. So that one's headed to the BNSF up in Cicero, Illinois. Not sure what else we'll see. We've got about a couple hours left out here, and I guess we'll just see how that goes.
All right, so if y'all don't frequent this town, you probably won't notice much of a difference, but all these weeds that were growing up along the curve here have since been taken care of, at least somewhat. And not to brag or anything, but I did this. In my boredom, I came in here with a weed eater and cut all of this stuff down that was growing up along here. Like, there were small trees growing up through here too. I had to cut with a set of branch cutters, so I spent about 3 hours out here clearing stuff. Since the city's not going to do it anymore, it doesn't look like, because it's just been growing out of control for the last few years. So enjoy it or don't. We're going to try and shoot a train here, so we'll see how that goes.
For the record, none of that work was paid for or sponsored. I just got tired of seeing weeds there, so I took care of it myself since, like I said, the city's not going to. We didn't have a whole lot of time left, but there were a couple trains in the picture. Amtrak number 92 was coming up from Miami, and with an event going on in Plant City and a Trump 2020 banner hanging from one of the crossing gates on Palmer Street, Amtrak 92 crested the hill and sped through town, not without leaving a dump of smoke behind, however. Amtrak 92 would give clearance to our last train. Under some of the last lights of day, the S-line signals would come up one last time. And after spending 3.5 hours working on the scenery on this curve, it feels good to catch a train on it. Blessed by our last few minutes, K70705 was to round the corner and cross the diamond. Here's a solid unit consist of empty ethanol tanks coming out of CSX's Yeoman Yard, headed for Lafayette, Indiana for another load of ethanol to bring back here. I'll just point this out now. The fact that we were able to catch both a northbound phosphate and ethanol train today makes this day extraordinary. It's uncommon for us to see one of these trains on a random outing, let alone two of them. Just a few minutes before 5 p.m., here's to an absolutely extraordinary day. Thanks to everybody who came out and met up with me today, and thank you, State of Florida, for having today's weather be absolutely gorgeous. Started out cloudy, ended out clear, overall a beautiful day. If this is what December has to offer this year, I'm all for it. Thanks for joining me on this outing, as always, and I'll see you out there next time on the Sunshine State Rails.